Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion. It is now hurricane season, June 1st, 2021, and we have a long way to go. This is just the beginning of a 6-month vigil where we look at the tropics. I'm going to be doing that just about every day of the hurricane season with you. There'll be times when I take some personal time and do some stuff with my family, of course, when things are nice and quiet. But in the rest of the time period, I'll be right here doing what I've been doing for a long time, updating you on what's going on in the tropics each afternoon with a video discussion. And, real quick, promote this quickly, my podcast every morning, that's a lot easier to do, an audio podcast. Every single morning around 8 a.m. Eastern Time, I drop the latest episode. It's kind of like a little digest, much shorter, and it's all audio than this video discussion. It's called Hurricane Season, the podcast. Available anywhere that you get podcasts these days, pretty much. And it's just a little digest, a little encapsulated look at the things that I am watching in the tropics, kind of teasing what I'll be talking about in this, the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. So here we are. It's June 1st, and what will we expect? Well, a real quick look at climatology. This part of the Atlantic Basin, well, that's just too much of a thin line there. Let's thicken it up. This part of the Atlantic Basin, no, not much activity in the month of June, and if you do see activity out there in June, that is a pretty bad sign. That's a sign of a very, very busy season ahead. This region out here we call the main development region, and that typically doesn't get active until later in July, and certainly August and September. And some of our more infamous long-track hurricanes originate from these easterly waves that get their start over Africa. They come out over the Atlantic. They find moisture and favorable conditions. Many of them turn out to sea. Some of them come across and impact the islands. Some of them go north of the islands, maybe come up the east coast or end up in the Gulf of Mexico. You know the drill, but at least this time of year, this is the main area that we look at. The far western part of the basin, that's typically where we have the energy from stalled fronts that maybe come down into the Gulf of Mexico. The CAG, or the Central American Gyre, this large kind of turning of the atmosphere over a pretty broad scale around Central America. That's why it's called the Central American Gyre. That can occasionally crank out. It's kind of like a little mini hurricane factory or tropical storm or cyclone factory, whatever way you want to look at it. Sometimes those will set up. And then every once in a while you do get a tropical wave, as I mentioned earlier, that come off Africa. They don't do anything out here. But when they get into the Caribbean, especially the western portion, they start to flare up under more favorable conditions. Usually the month of June, it's the blue and the green area. Looking at it in a different perspective, and again, hopefully they will update this ending year soon. We're getting a little long in the tooth there on these maps, 1851 to 2015. Got a few more to add between 2015 and now, but I digress. That's not my department. This is what we'd expect to see the first 10 days of the month of June. And again, it works perfect with that map I just showed you, right? The climatology doesn't lie. This is the reason why. Going back to 1851, these are the points of origin and their tracks. And then in the eastern Pacific, you see that area as well. Sort of clustered close to the land areas. Let me just start over here and highlight it with blue. The points of origin are clustered closer to land areas. As you can see, Central America kind of getting straddled either side by these dots. And that's because, again, this part of the Atlantic Basin does not usually light up until later on. So we'll reference this map every 10 days. Mental note to myself to make sure I do that. So the next one, we'll pick it up on June the 11th or thereabouts. All right, so today is the first day of the season. No activity expected over the next 48 hours or the next 5 days. The National Hurricane Center is, of course, trying to get me back. Come on, there I am. The official voice for the United States government, the Weather Service, etc. There's a lot of private organizations, people like me that tell you what's going on in the tropics, television meteorologists, and even people with Facebook and YouTube pages and channels. There's Twitch, Twitter, probably TikTok videos as well. Everybody's an expert, but the one true voice of authority in the country is the National Hurricane Center. So I will refer to them for 95% of everything that we talk about. Once in a while, I will inject my opinion and kind of an outlook, as I call it, keys to the game, beyond their scope of their protocol, 5-day outlooks, 5-day forecasts, whatever. We can speculate a little bit, but I try to refrain from that. If you've known my style over the years, no hype forecasting, no BS, at least I try not to, and if I do, call me out on it. I can take it. It's, you know, the hurricanes are going to be sensational enough when they come. By default, they are an exciting piece of nature's wonder. They really are. That they bother us and cause mayhem and destruction and even loss of life, that's something that we have some control over, especially in the more developed world, because we have the foresight of forecasts, computer models, people like me that tell you what's going on, and of course the fine men and women at the National Hurricane Center to tell you what's up. So this is where we start. This is what I will reference most of the time, and for now, all is quiet in the Atlantic Basin. In the Eastern Pacific, we have Tropical Storm Blanca, kind of hanging on there at about 60 miles per hour. This is what that looks like on infrared satellite, courtesy of another reliable source. You know this, tropicaltidbits.com, and Dr. Levi Cowan. If you didn't know, he got his PhD, and he now works, I think, at the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, or something like that. He's got his job forecasting cyclones for a living, and congratulations to Levi. Very accomplished from Alaska through college at FSU, and now a PhD contributing to the real-world science and applications of weather forecasting. Pretty neat, and his website still remains there, tropicaltidbits.com. Nice satellite animation here of Blanca. Kind of disheveled. It's not all like spiral looking with banding and whatnot. There's some wind shear coming across it from the west and the southwest as well. It's, you know, it's just June 1st. It's not the peak of the season, and we don't have ideal conditions in the southwest or southeastern Pacific. Maybe in the southwest Pacific we eventually will, but no, not in the southeast Pacific, not today. So Blanca is not going to do much more. It's not going to be a threat to Mexico, except for some high clouds streaming over, filtering out the sunshine a little bit. As you can see in the Atlantic Basin, pretty much dominated by strong upper-level winds going in this direction, cutting across from the islands here from west to east, and, you know, some northerly shear here. It's easy to point out when you've got the cirrus clouds stretching out like cotton candy. It's real easy to spot. And I don't see anything in the global models over the next several days. One thing I want to show you, in the Eastern Pacific here, this is the GFS, and I'm going to talk real quick about what I do. In case you're brand new to my videos, this is my favorite level of the atmosphere to analyze in the modeling, and my model of choice is the GFS, mainly because we get access to all the panels, all the different layers and whatnot, free of charge from NCEP, the National Centers for Environmental Prediction. They put all these files out on servers, and people like Levi and others, there's weathernerds.org, the Weather Nerds site, and then the pay sites, Weatherbell, weathermodels.us, and I'm sure there's others I can't think of off the top of my head. But the bottom line is the GFS is unlike the Euro, where you got to pay a lot of money to access the deep layers of the Euro. The GFS, you don't have to do that. And so one of the nice things is we can look at it in 3 or 6 hour increments and all the different layers of the atmosphere that the model offers. And my favorite is right here, 850 millibars. What does that mean? Well, that's about 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. So if you went up 5,000 feet in a standard atmosphere, your barometer should say 850 millibars if everything else is equal. So this is a good layer of the atmosphere. It's about the lower mile of the atmosphere, roughly. And I like to look at this little parameter here, the geopotential height. That is these different height lines in here. And the cyclonic vorticity. That's this yellow stuff and this dark red to almost black color. Vorticity, the spin or the energy, and what we call the conservation of angular momentum, where the faster something spins, that energy is getting conserved and it's bundled. That's what I'm looking for. And that is the telltale sign of it in the GFS for Blanca. That's what it looks like. So that's my clue when we look at the models, either with what's going on right now an already developed storm, or when we're looking for something to develop potentially down the road. So keep that in mind. So let's move this out into time. You see that little blob there, that circle of vorticity? That's Blanca. There's 48 hours, 72, 96, and you see it start to open up and weaken, and by day 5, 120 hours out, it starts to fade out a little bit. Why did it do that? What's going on? Why is it losing that definition? Well, I know that there's cooler water over here, a more stable atmosphere, and so it loses its identity, its definition, if you will, in the modeling. It's just so neat that the math and the physics can pick that up. I think it's cool anyway. But check this out. Look at how these little wind barbs come around from the east, and then they switch around to the west over here. And if I draw my own little arrows on top to kind of augment that for you, that's really neat, isn't it? I think that's cool. That's kind of this monsoon trough kind of deal, this little convergence area through here, a weakness down there. The westerly wind shift at the southern end of it helps to promote more of this vorticity across the area. And yeah, something else might try to spin up off of that. We'll wait and see. But that's an interesting sign. And as we move over to the Atlantic, let's see if we see anything like that on this side of Central America. And there's 48 hours, 72, 96, 120. No, nothing to speak of in the Atlantic, but we can see the big Bermuda High trying to flex its muscle here, extending or ridging across the western basin. And look at this deep southeasterly flow across the Caribbean and into the deep south. Moist, humid, hot, all that kind of good stuff. And by the way, there's Bermuda right there. And this is really an extension of the big Azores Bermuda High, and it shifts back and forth, daily, weekly, whatever, but it's generally the Bermuda Azores High, or the subtropical ridge as we call it. And it's going to really start to show itself as we get through the month of June. So out through day 5, it's pretty much just straight easterly and then eventually southeasterly flow across the deep tropics, through the Caribbean, and into the Gulf. None of these little impulses through here, these little areas of vorticity, amount to anything. They're still stretched out, not bundling up, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Now, that being said, further out in time, whatever, there may be some changes as a more favorable Madden-Julian oscillation. That's just a fancy way of saying a window of opportunity. The upward motion in the atmosphere at the 200 millibar level. Remember, 850 is 5,000 feet, so at 200 millibars, you're closer to up there where the jets fly, commercial airliners. And it's that level of the atmosphere, 200 millibars, where the air has to spread out evenly and go away, diverge, not sink and compress and warm. You have to have the air rising and moving away to get ventilation for tropical systems. And we might start to see that come into play beyond the 5-day time frame, maybe closer to 10 days. So let's wait a few days, and we'll see if that starts to manifest itself in the operational modeling here, like the GFS. So far, out to 5 days, no signs of it. So that's good news. Moving on, speaking of in the future and way out in time, our good buddy down in New Zealand from the National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, and yes, I said New Zealand. Why would I follow somebody in New Zealand? Well, Ben, he's not from New Zealand. He's from New York. And, he's from the Hudson Valley area. He now lives and forecasts in New Zealand. I mean, come on, you got a computer and an internet connection. You can forecast from Mars if your bandwidth was good enough. And if Ben lived on Mars, he would probably do just what he's doing now. And that is put out these awesome thematic maps. Awesome in terms of what they display. I like the look of them. Not so awesome if you know what this means. In the green area, like I talked about in my long update yesterday, the preseason production, that's a big hurricane factory. And this is August through October, the peak months of the season. And this right here is a huge clue that you got a lot of upward motion, rising air over Africa, allowing those tropical waves, those easterly waves of energy, a wave of low pressure, a little kink in the low-level trades, some moisture and some convergence in there as well. A seedling, that is a seedling factory. And those come out into the Atlantic, and they do their thing, if the conditions are favorable over here. Now, you see all that red in the Atlantic basin, and you think, well, wouldn't they just head into that and die off? Not necessarily, because as I mentioned yesterday, this is a huge chunk of, if not the entire globe, right, stretched out on a globe, right, on a Mercator projection. You see where I was going with that. I'm trying to say it's a giant world, a big map, and we're looking at large scale. This is the entire continent of Africa in here. So if you get a tropical wave that comes off and one hurricane that's embedded in here somewhere, all you need is a little area about that big where conditions are favorable, and that hurricane can explode. We have seen that last year. Laura, close to land in Louisiana. Delta, Zeta, a couple years before that. Michael, closing in on the Florida Panhandle. Andrew, last couple of days before coming into Florida. Irma, before it got to the island of Barbuda and beyond. You only need little pockets of favorability in the overall background state of a favorable environment to have trouble. So don't let this throw you off that green is favorable here, but red is not favorable there. The Atlantic basin is subject to troughs coming through, intrusions of dry air. It's very hard to predict where these systems will end up, but this is a sign that the overall production of strong tropical waves to seed the Atlantic with will be there. Then it'll be a matter of where do the favorable areas farther west set up. So an interesting tweet once again from our buddy Ben Knoll that, as he says right there, as I told you, they can produce robust easterly waves that develop perhaps into Atlantic hurricanes. And then a La Nina-like ocean temperature pattern is also predicted by September. And then you have different people chiming in about it. That's the good thing about social media, with all the negativity that you hear about it. And Matt, he's actually one of our patrons. And I love smart people that are engaged and know what they're looking at, kind of asking questions about the precipitation plots and so forth and so on. Anyway, that's the latest from Ben. And we'll see what he says when we get to about mid-month with the latest UK Met and Euro blend. All right. The tracking maps, we do a lot of apps, you can track on your phone. We have an amazing online tracking map ourselves on the HurricaneTrack Insider site. But I still offer these paper maps. It's truly 18 by 24. I've only got a couple dozen left of the 2021 version. So if you want to order, the link will be in today's video. It's at HurricaneTrack.com. There's a nice little headline there that says 2021 paper tracking map. It's $18 plus $4 flat rate shipping, and you can get your hands on one. And we've already crossed Anna off the list. The next name is Bill, and then we go to Claudette, Dana, not quite, Danny, and then on down the list, maybe ending up with Wanda, if certain forecasts from certain agencies come to fruition. We'll have to wait and see. We may use up all the names. We might not. We shall see. Hopefully not, to be honest with you. I got too much to do. I'm working on a production. Season 2 of the Hurricane Highway, I got to catch up with all that. And last year was just too darn busy. You have to have hurricanes. You truly do, to balance the heat budget on the planet. As Dr. Neil Frank once said, if you didn't have hurricanes, you might have something worse. So we just don't need too many, and we don't need them to go in and plow people's lives under. That's no good either. All right, so all season long, connect and follow. I love this graphic. Appreciate Kari putting this together. Kari's one of our supporters from over in the UK who makes a lot of my graphics so that I can focus on content. So we are crowdfunded here, patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. A lot of really cool stuff in return for your support as we grow our crowdfunding crowd, which, by the way, is over 600 strong on this day, June 1st. This is twice as much as we started with last year, and that is a testament to what we are doing. We're doing good things, and success breeds more success. I like that. It's helped us to do a lot. We did a lot last year. It was our biggest year ever, both physically, literally, metaphorically, everything. But it's truly allowed us to grow, cover more winter weather, more severe weather. I've been out on the Great Plains a couple of times already. Thanks to this funding, thanks to the support. Literally people coming to help out as well. It's not just about the money that makes the world go around. It's about ideas and people literally lending a helping hand. Whether it's the back-end server stuff, and the graphics like Kari is producing, all kinds of stuff. And that's how you do it, patreon.com/HurricaneTrack if you want to get involved. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, a lot of that also with the help of people from behind the scenes. CJ does most of my Facebook stuff. Really appreciate him doing that. And you know what? I still have email. I sure do. hermark@gmail.com if you ever want to email me with questions, comments. You want to offer up your property. If you ever want us to put a camera at your location, you got beachfront property, that's good stuff to know in advance. It really is. And we've had a lot of people over the years do just that. So that's my email address if you want to get in touch with me that way. All right. And again, one more time, Hurricane Season, the podcast. Start your morning if you want to with me in your ear. You know, go for a quick jog. And it's going to be very quick because it's only 5 minutes or less usually. The morning podcast will be longer when we get something developed and we have to talk about it. But again, it's more of this little digest and like an encapsulated Cliff Notes version of what I'm looking at for the day ahead. Hurricane Season, the podcast. Look for it wherever you get your podcast. And if you're on YouTube and watching, subscribe, like the video, share with your friends, colleagues, put it on message boards, whatever. Let's get the word out about what we're doing. HurricaneTrack, our small little group here, in the relative sense of things, of the billions of other people on the internet, is really remarkable. It really is, and I'm proud as heck to have you part of it. And I'm looking forward to doing a lot with you this hurricane season. And I want to keep you safe. I want to keep you informed. And so thank you for allowing me to do just that. Going on more than 20 years now, and it's all because of you guys. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Almost said Monday. I really did. And the first day of hurricane season. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll talk to you some more tomorrow.